What's up, StarCraft fans? The co-op commander prestiges are not created equally. Some are very rarely used because they offer few advantages, if any. Today, I'll be counting down my top 10 list of the commander prestiges in most need of a buff. If you are a player, you may want to know that these prestiges are not what I think are the best. You can absolutely win with them. In fact, I'm going to show you how, but there are better options out there. And for the developers, I may give you a few ideas, may or may not give you a few ideas for how to make these guys better. My number 10 is Statman's first prestige, Signal Savant. It will make his stat zones way bigger per statlight, but you lose access to Super Gary. This prestige is not very weak per se, it's just that Super Gary is one of the strongest mechanics that the commander has as a whole, and by removing that option, you are severely limiting their options. True, they still have great units, they still have the Zerglings with the Hardened Shields, they still have Infestors, they still have these Mighty Ultralisks, but Super Gary really is missed here because you can see he only has a singular E-Gorb, he only has a singular overcharge of satellites, he can't even use Gary Zone to get anywhere, and he's kind of just stuck here waiting for charges, waiting for cooldowns, and he can't really help this poor Ultralisk do all the work here. A lot of people like this prestige because you technically get a huge stat zone per statlight, and they think that increases the vision. The truth is, it doesn't increase the vision, it just increases the radius of the stat zone provided by each statlight. The vision remains the same, and even if this stat light gets disabled, it still gives vision, so the advantages that people think they have with this prestige are not actually a thing. How I would buff this prestige maybe is to make the stud deploy instantly and have them deploy without the need of an existing stat zone. Just have them deploy anywhere where you have vision and just have them deploy instantly. They can still be shot down if the enemies can shoot them within like half a second, but other than that, they should just be able to deploy really quickly, just to enable this prestige to have a little more advantage to it. Coming in at number 9 for me is Swan's third prestige, Payload Director. It will allow his Hercules to transport more units, and it allows the science vessels to also teleport across the map. But as you can see here, the Titan's micro to move the science vessels, the Hercules, the siege tanks, and the Goliaths around are still there. It's kind of a whole thing to play a Swan, especially if you're used to playing other commanders, because Swan requires you to build units, get upgrades, you get production, you get supply, and micro on top of everything you have to do on the field itself. It's actually a lot to manage a Swan, and this prestige doesn't really help that. Plus, the nerf to your concentrated beam and pulse cannon by making them have a longer cooldown absolutely is a deal breaker for some, because you don't have splash, you don't have a means to eliminate the enemies without detection, cloaked enemies at least without detection, and you have to wait for your science vessels, which cost a lot of gas to build, to get there. They can teleport of course, but they can also just as easily get sniped. How I would buff this prestige is, first of all, I'd like to have the Hercules itself to have repair base. When units are loaded inside the Hercules, they will get a bit of healing on top of the researched, regenerative biosteel from the armory. That plus the auto heal from the Hercules, and science vessels can also heal units inside the Hercules. That would be great. Also, if you can increase the vision radius and help the science vessels, that will help them from getting sniped by enemy units. That will actually help out Swan, because you can see when stuff are loaded inside the Hercules, the only targets of these Vikings are the Hercules itself and the science vessels. You want to have these science vessels able to see from front. You can see that science vessel gets sniped right there. You want to have an option to keep the science vessels further behind and still have them see the Banshees, which will be shooting these tanks later on. That's how I would buff my number 9 prestige need of a buff, Swan's Payload Director. Number 8 for me is Nova's second prestige, Tactical Dispatcher. This will allow her to pick up or use the Griffin Airstrike more frequently at the expense of making the Griffin Airstrike way less available. It's not a weak prestige per se, it's just that it's not very attractive relative to the first prestige, which will allow you to have so many liberators, and the third prestige, which gives you Super Cloak. Those are way cooler and way more practical, especially in mutations. There have been times when this prestige is better for some mutations, but that's actually few and far between. The default for Nova is the first prestige or even the third prestige. The second prestige is more of an afterthought. That's why when you remember that one time it was actually good, I actually didn't realize it was as a thing until very much later on. How I would buff this prestige is actually by buffing the airlift itself. My idea is when you use the Griffin airlift and you drop your forces somewhere, it should release some sort of EMP that will temporarily stun the enemies. Think of it like a sort of mobilization wave that doesn't have to deal damage. It just has to stun the enemies and give you some sort of advantage to incentivize more usages of the Griffin airlift. Just to make this prestige, actually mean something. Because as you can see, I don't think I've ever used a single airlift throughout this whole game. Like, you've seen a few minutes of it already. I haven't used it even once. And that's sort of a problem when you have a prestige specifically for using airlift, and you don't even use airlift. So that's why Nova Tactical Dispatcher is my number 8. My number 7 is Artanis' second prestige, Nexus Legate. This will allow his power field to teleport any units inside of it whenever you switch the location of the power field. I believe I will use it here in a couple moments, but that will actually give your units the ability to teleport anywhere, which actually does solve one of Artanis' biggest weakness. Plus, if you have the Speed Increases prestige or the Speed Increases mastery, it will give your units essentially a stim into wherever you move your power field. Theoretically, it's really good, and at one point it was good when the cost of the energy, or the energy cost, was only 10 to move the power field. Now it costs 25, and it makes it very costly to actually switch the power field around. It's not bad per se, it's just expensive to actually use the power field because 25 is a lot, especially at that slow of an energy regen rate. How I'm going with this is obviously to revert the nerf to the power field switch, make it cost 10 energy again, and I will go even further, make the power field larger. Just make the power field larger so you don't have to walk that far to get all your units inside the power field. Yeah, just expand the power field and make the power field switch cost 10 energy instead of 25, because throughout this whole game I have not used a single shield overcharge. It's amazing, but I couldn't use it because it's so much energy. Look, I'm constantly at 0 energy because I have to spend all of it to move my power field around. Not very conducive to using other top bar abilities for Artanis. That's why Nexus Legate is my number 7. Number 6 on my list is Stukov's second prestige, Plague Warden. This will give his Banshees the ability to load infested civilians at the cost of making the civilians have a shorter timed life. This might be a bit controversial to some, and you might expect this to be a bit higher given my opinions of this prestige. I don't like this prestige at all. But for me, it's not that weak per se. You can still play it as normal Stukov. You can still go for siege tanks. You can still go for mechanical units. You can still go bunkers. That will all still work. The only reason I dislike this prestige is because of all the commands it shoves into the infested Banshee. I think Blizzard really likes the idea of the unit. They find it cool. But for me, it's a lot of commands with conflicting hotkeys, just messing up all your hotkeys. Unless you have grid hotkey setup or something, it can get confusing, which is why I'd rather have, of course, this is how I would change it. I would say that it's not necessarily in need of a buff per se, just a rework. I think the loading of the civilians will be a lot better off if it were on the overlords. Just give overlords the ability to lift and drop the civilians instead of the Banshees. The Banshees already have a lot of commands. They can cloak and decloak, they can burrow and unburrow. Just don't cram too many commands. Again, I don't think it needs... It's only number 6. Because, yes, it's not as strong as Stukhov's other prestiges, but also because I think it's in more need of a rework than a buff per se. And I think it should be the Overlords that get the infested loading and unloading and throwing ability rather than the Banshees. That's why Stukhov's Plague Warden is only number 6. Number 5 for me is Kerrigan's first prestige, Malevolent Matriarch. This will make her creep much more effective in terms of attack damage. And obviously the downside is you don't get Omega Worms. I believe it's a huge nerf when you take away Kerrigan's Omega Worms. That's why you basically never see this prestige used anywhere. The Omega Worm gives Kerrigan mobility, not even mobility, omnipresence, because you can load and unload instantly anywhere. And you can just pop your army out and it'll be just murder city with Kerrigan out there. But without the Omega Worms, you can see that her drones have to rally all the way out here to collect these crystals like a normal person. Yuck, disgusting. Obviously, how I would buff this prestige is you gotta make it more incentivized, incentivize more usage of this prestige by making the attack damage, attack values of her units in Kerrigan stronger, while on creep. Just incentivize spreading creep everywhere. Give her additional stats. Yeah, give her Leaping Strike, her Psionic Shift, and her Immobilization Wave more damage when she's standing on creep. Also maybe make creep spread even slightly further. I know Malignant Creep already spreads far. Make it spread even further. Maybe not twice the radius, maybe 130% of its current radius in this prestige. Make it even more spread out and make it cheaper to spread creep. Maybe lower the energy requirement, maybe lower the cooldown, allow the creep to spread even further. Make Kerrigan really a creep spreader on this map and buff Kerrigan's attack damage and ability damage when on creep with this prestige. That, I believe, will incentivize this prestige over her other prestiges. And yeah, that's Kerrigan at number 5. Number 4 is Voruzun's second prestige, Withering Siphon. This will make her crowd control abilities like the Disruption Web, the Confusion, deal damage when enemies are caught inside it. The downside is that the damage of the units themselves are reduced by a lot. And it's actually this reason why basically no one uses this prestige. And when I use this prestige, you can see that I still go for Dark Templar. I still think, even with this prestige, even when it incentivizes the use of stuff like Dark Archons and Corsair, I will build more Corsairs here, but even with that, I still think the best option for Voruzun here is Dark Templar and Corsair. I think if Blizzard wanted us to use more niche units like the Centurion and the Dark Archon, the second prestige, the Withering Siphon, should, I think, instead A, make the Centurions cheaper, make them cost like 50 minerals or something. That will make it worthwhile. Even if you reduce their damage to the Withering Siphon levels, make them cost 50 minerals each, and for Dark Archons, make them cost, instead of 375 gas, make them cost 150 gas. That, I believe, will improve Voruzun specifically Withering Siphon, or Voruzun's Withering Siphon specifically, at number 4. For number 3, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and say Raynor without prestige, Renegade Commander. So Raynor's prestiges, I can't really pinpoint one of them that specifically needs a buff, but I can definitely say that Raynor in general needs a buff. He used to be one of my strongest commanders to play because he used to have double mules. His spider mines used to be stronger, and the new enemy compositions that got added, I think like 2018 or something, are more geared towards splash damage and just unit deleting forces, which made it seem like they were all hard countering Raynor. It generally felt like Blizzard, in trying to make the enemy stronger, just decided to make it slightly harder for other commanders, but hard countering Raynor. How I would make it better for Raynor is basically bring back his old tools. The power creep of other commanders is really strongly felt for Raynor, so he needs double mules back. He needs invincible spider mines back when they crawl towards the enemy. And something new, give him even the weakest hero commander out there. He just needs an anchor for the early game aside from his top parts. Just give him the basic Raynor. He can either have the penetrating blast, he can have a grenade, or not even have anything at all. Just give him an anchor for his early game. He can revive every minute like a normal hero. He can just shoot up, shoot down, just anything. Just double mules, the spider mines, that are invincible when they track toward the enemy, and of course the hero unit. That's what I would give Raynor's no prestige, because they are top 3. Number 2, you probably know it. Han and Horner, no prestige. Mercenary Leader and Dominion Admiral. Once again, I'm going to cheat here because Han and Horner, it's not about a weak prestige versus others, it's just Han and Horner in general. I want a buff to Han and Horner's basic kit here. They need buffs all across the board, and it's much needed because they're consistently at the lower half of the commander tier lists whenever 226 Ben Herman and I make them. I think you can buff them in many different ways. What I have in mind is you buff them both on the mercenary side and on the admiral side. So for Mira Han, you want to buff her by increasing the salvage from murdered forces from was it 30%? Make it 60%. Make the salvage up to 60% from where it was before. Or if it's already 60%, make it even more. Just make a way for the mercenary to trade more effectively against Amon. And on Matt Horner's side, the admiral side, you want to make the airstrike better. Whether that's making the planes themselves invulnerable, make them not interceptable by point defense drones, have them hit air, make them cost no supply, a combination of 2 or more of those things. Just buff the airstrike. You can test them. You can see which one works, which was overpowered. I doubt any of them would be. Just, 1, 2, 3 or more of those things all at the same time. That's what I feel that these airstrikes need to make them more compelling to use. And just any buffs to Han and Horner, who is ranked number 2. And number 1, if you've been checking out, if you've seen the entire list up to now, you probably know who's number 1. I'll give you a couple more seconds to guess it. Yeah, you're right. Number 1, Abathur, 3rd prestige, the Limitless. More like the listless. More like the powerless. Because this prestige absolutely sucks. The biomass requirement to get your first ultimate evolutions has been raised from 100 all the way to 200. Not even 150, not even 170. And as a result, it takes even the best speedrunners so long to get their first ultimate evolution. So I want you to look at the counter here. It starts out at 0. It's now at 57 seconds. And this is probably the best enemy composition on the best map to farm biomass for your first Brutalisk. And it's gonna take me way longer than necessary to get it because the biomass count remains the same, the enemies remain the same, but you need way more of it just to unlock your first Brutalisk. I am baiting enemies into toxicness like an angry person, like a madman. And look, we're almost 2 minutes in, still no ultimate evolution. I'm trying to bait those enemies using advanced techniques like putting down toxic nests far out ahead, I'm trying to hold that immortal in place and get all its essence, its biomass. It's still not enough for an ultimate evolution, so I have to go to the next area. I have cleared out two. I have cleared out two Terrazine geysers, and it's still nothing. I'm at 21 supply. I it takes two spine crawlers to expand. It doesn't get any easier. I'm gonna have to kill these three guys using a single toxic nest like that. And guess what? It's still not enough. My goodness, I have to go to the third set of geysers just to get my first ultimate evolution. And what do you guys think? Will I actually get my ultimate evolution this time? Will I actually get it? Yes. Even in the best of circumstances, it took me, not a regular person, me 3.5 minutes to get my first ultimate evolutions in the best of circumstances against my favorite enemy composition on my favorite map. That's not Dawn of Vermilion. It took me that long to get a single Brutalisk. Of course, once a first Brutalisk has been gotten, it becomes considerably easier, but to that point, or getting to that point, you will absolutely be carried by your ally. And in worse circumstances, for example, if you're a Temple of the Past, if you're up against Terran on a bad map, and you don't know the pattern to get a lot of biomass early, you will not end up with a lot of ultimate evolutions until you get to that point where your ally has basically won the game for you. That is the story of this prestige. And imagine if I had an ally here. Another thing that your ally will probably do, if he's not acutely aware of your situation, is that he will steal all your kills instead of luring them to your toxic nests. So you'll have even fewer biomass, and your ultimate evolution will take even longer. Because your ally will not think about getting you biomass. Your ally will usually think of getting himself kills or the main objective protected. How I would buff this prestige? There are a few ideas of how to do that. I'm not sure which one is the best. You can, of course, just straight up lower the biomass requirements to get a first ultimate evolution, but if it's back down to 100, there will have to be something in place to make it not simply too strong. You can maybe increase the cost of basic units in lieu of getting the biomass requirement cheaper. You can maybe lower the basic stats of the Brutalisk. You can lower the effectiveness of the symbiotes. You can maybe lower the probability that toxic nests will buff your biomass. Something, anything. Because look, 6 minutes in, I only have 2 ultimate evolutions in the best of circumstances. And that is absolutely not acceptable if you have the basic loadout being way better than whatever is going on here. And yeah, that's why Abathur, the Limitless, 3rd Prestige, comes in at number 1. So, what do you guys think? Did I get it right with your top 10? Do you have one or more commanders and prestiges who you think need more buffs than the 10 guys I have on here? Let me know in the comments down below. I will see you guys next time.